The rushing waters of the Blackstone River churned violently beneath Teresa Blackwell's thrashing body, her desperate screams swallowed by the roar of the flood, as May 1876 delivered its most devastating storm to Colorado territory in years. She had only wanted to collect wildflowers along the normally peaceful riverbank when the sudden swell from upstream caught her unaware, sweeping her from the muddy embankment and into the frigid, turbulent current. Her soaked calico dress now threatened to drag her under completely. "Hold tight, I've got you." The deep voice barely registered through her terror as a lariat snaked through the air, landing within inches of her flailing arms. Teresa reached for it just as her head dipped below the surface, her lungs burning with the effort not to inhale the murky water. Samuel Mackley had been tracking a herd of stray cattle when he'd spotted the woman's predicament from atop the ridge. Without hesitation, he'd urged his paint stallion down the steep embankment, unwinding his rope as he rode. Now, his heart hammered against his ribs as he watched her pale fingers grasp the lifeline he'd thrown. "That's it, hold on," he called, quickly wrapping the other end around his saddle horn before carefully backing his horse away from the riverbank. The woman's weight pulled against the rope as Sam steadied his mount. Every muscle in his body tensed against the strain. Inch by inch, he drew her toward the shoreline, his jaw clenched with the effort. When she was close enough, Sam dismounted in one fluid motion and waded into the shallows, his chaps and boots instantly soaked. He reached for her, strong hands grasping her arms as he pulled her from the water's deadly embrace. "I've got you now," he assured, lifting her trembling form into his arms. Her skin was alarmingly cold against his, her lips tinged with blue. "You're safe." Teresa coughed violently, water spewing from her lungs as she clutched desperately at the stranger's sodden shirt. Her vision swam with tears and river water, but she could make out a rugged face beneath the brim of a well-worn hat, concern etched in every feature. Thank you," she managed through chattering teeth, her entire body convulsing with cold and fear. Sam carried her to higher ground, away from the swollen river's reach. He set her down gently on a flat boulder and quickly removed his leather duster, wrapping it around her shoulders. "What in tarnation were you doing so close to the river during flood season, miss?" he asked, his tone more worried than accusatory. "I didn't know," Teresa whispered, drawing the coat tighter around herself. "I only arrived in Stone Creek last week. I was gathering flowers for my aunt's table when the water rose so suddenly." A fresh bout of shivering cut off her explanation. Sam frowned, glancing at the darkening sky. "Storm's getting worse. My cabin's not far, can get you warm and dry before taking you home." He paused, then added, "Sam Mackley, madam. I run cattle about 5 miles north of here." "Teresa Blackwell," she replied, attempting to rise but finding her legs unsteady. "My aunt has a millinery shop in town. I'm staying with her while I—" She faltered, unwilling to share her full circumstances with a stranger, no matter how heroic. Sam noted her hesitation but didn't press. Instead, he whistled for his horse, which had retreated several yards up the bank. "Can you ride, Miss Blackwell? I can set you in front of me if you're too weak." Teresa's pride bristled momentarily at the suggestion, but common sense prevailed. "I believe that would be best, Mr. Mackley." "I feel rather faint." With surprising gentleness for such calloused hands, Sam helped her onto his horse before mounting behind her. One arm securely around her waist, he guided the animal away from the river and toward the foothills in the distance. Teresa leaned back against his solid chest, too exhausted and cold to worry about propriety. Her aunt would be scandalized to know she was riding alone with a stranger, pressed against him so intimately, but circumstances had hardly left her options. Besides, Aunt Martha wouldn't expect her back for hours yet. "Been in these parts long, Mr. Mackley?" she asked, trying to distract herself from both her discomfort and her awareness of his proximity. "Born here," Sam replied, his deep voice resonating against her back. "My pa staked his claim 30 years ago. Land's been Mackley property ever since." The rain began to fall more heavily as they rode, but Teresa barely noticed, protected by Sam's broad shoulders and the warmth of his duster. Despite her predicament, she found herself noting details about her rescuer: the scent of leather and pine that clung to him, the careful way he held her, ensuring she wouldn't slip from the saddle. Within 20 minutes, a small cabin came into view, nestled against a grove of aspens. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, and a covered porch protected the entrance from the elements. "You left your fire burning?" Teresa asked, surprised. Sam chuckled, the sound warm against her ear. "My foreman Hank must be inside. Good timing, he can ride to town and let your aunt know you're safe." As they approached, the cabin door swung open, and an older man with a silver-streaked beard appeared. His eyes widened at the sight of Teresa. "Sam." "What in blazes found this lady being swept downstream?" Sam explained, dismounting before reaching up to help Teresa down. "Miss Blackwell, this is Hank Winters. Been with my family since I was knee-high to a grasshopper." Teresa nodded politely, though she could barely keep her teeth from chattering. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Winters." Hank immediately stepped aside. "Get her in by the fire, Sam. I'll see to your horse." Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable: a main room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 4 chairs, and a few pieces of sturdy furniture. A doorway led to what Teresa presumed was a bedroom, and a ladder against one wall appeared to lead to a loft space. Sam guided her to a rocking chair near the hearth. "Sit here. I'll find you something dry to wear." Teresa wanted to protest. Wearing a man's clothing seemed terribly improper, but the cold had seeped so deeply into her bones that she merely nodded, grateful for any respite from her sodden garments. Sam disappeared into the bedroom, returning moments later with a flannel shirt and a pair of trousers that had been cinched with rope at the ankles. "These are the smallest I have. There's a quilt too." He set the items on a nearby stool and cleared his throat. "I'll step outside while you change." Once alone, Teresa peeled off her ruined dress and petticoats with trembling fingers. The simple act of removing her wet clothes brought immediate relief. She slipped into Sam's shirt, which hung nearly to her knees, and then the trousers, which despite being rolled up several times still threatened to fall from her hips. She wrapped the quilt around herself just as a knock sounded at the door. "Decent," Sam called. "Yes, thank you," Teresa answered, settling back into the rocking chair. Sam entered, carrying a steaming mug. "Coffee with a touch of whiskey, best medicine for a chill." Teresa accepted the drink gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. She took a tentative sip, the liquor burning a path down to her stomach. "That's bracing." A small smile tugged at the corner of Sam's mouth as he crouched to add another log to the fire. In the warm glow of the flames, Teresa could better see his features: strong jaw darkened by a day's growth of beard, straight nose, and eyes the color of aged bourbon. Not classically handsome, perhaps, but striking in a rugged way that suited the wild country around them. "Hank's headed to town," Sam informed her, settling into a chair opposite. "He'll let your aunt know where you are and that you're safe. Weather permitting, I'll take you home tomorrow." Teresa's eyes widened. "Tomorrow." But surely a crack of thunder interrupted her protest, followed by the unmistakable sound of hail pelting the roof. Sam raised an eyebrow. "Oh," Teresa said quietly, "storms in these mountains are nothing to trifle with," Sam explained. "Rivers already dangerous. Roads will be washed out soon if they aren't already." Teresa sipped her coffee, dismay settling over her. 1 week in Colorado territory, and she'd already managed to find herself in an impossible situation, alone in a stranger's cabin, wearing his clothes, with no way to return to town until morning. What would Aunt Martha think? More importantly, what would she tell the townspeople? As if reading her thoughts, Sam spoke. "Your reputation won't suffer, Miss Blackwell. Hank's well respected in Stone Creek. Everyone knows a flood's nothing to fool with. Besides, you nearly drowned today. That takes precedence over gossip." "You're very kind, Mr. Mackley, but you don't understand. I came west to escape scandal, not create a new one." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and Teresa immediately pressed her lips together, mortified. Sam's expression remained carefully neutral. "East Coast." Teresa nodded. "Boston. My father's shipping business failed and he took his own life." She stared into her coffee, unable to meet Sam's eyes as she continued. The scandal was considerable. Mother couldn't bear it and followed him within a month. My aunt kindly offered me sanctuary here, where no one knew our family's disgrace. I'm sorry for your losses, Sam said quietly. But you should know folks out here judge a person on their merits, not their past. Most everyone came west running from something or searching for something. And which were you, Mr. Mackley? Teresa asked, finally looking up. Something flickered in Sam's eyes, a shadow of old pain quickly masked. Neither. I was born here, remember, never had reason to leave. Before Teresa could respond, the door burst open and Hank reappeared, soaked to the skin and breathing hard. Roads washed out just past Miller's Crossing, he reported, shaking water from his hat. Nearly lost the horse in that mud. Town's cut off till this weather breaks. Sam nodded grimly. Figured as much. You make it to the Blackwell place? Got word to the lady's aunt, Hank confirmed, glancing at Teresa. Proper worried she was, but relieved to hear you're safe, miss. Told her you're in good hands with Sam. Teresa managed a weak smile. Thank you for making the journey, Mr. Winters. I appreciate your kindness. Weren't nothing, Hank replied, hanging his dripping coat by the door. Your aunt seems a sensible sort. Asked me to tell you not to fret about propriety, saving your life matters more. Relief washed through Teresa. Aunt Martha had always been unconventional by Boston standards, which was precisely why Teresa had sought refuge with her. Still, being stranded with a bachelor rancher wasn't exactly the quiet new beginning she'd envisioned. Hank, you should get into some dry clothes before you catch your death, Sam suggested, rising from his chair. I'll start on supper. As Hank disappeared into what Teresa now realized must be his quarters in the loft, Sam moved to a small kitchen area where he began efficiently preparing a meal. Teresa watched him, noting the competent way he handled the cooking implements. Can I help? She offered, setting her empty mug aside and standing. Sam glanced over his shoulder. You feeling up to it? You took quite a battering in that river. I'm much improved, Teresa assured him, though her muscles ached in protest as she joined him at the simple counter. What are we making? Nothing fancy. Venison stew, cornbread. He handed her a knife and gestured to some carrots. These need cutting. They worked side by side in comfortable silence for several minutes, the only sounds the crackling fire and the steady drumming of rain on the roof. Teresa found herself stealing glances at the tall rancher beside her. Though his hands were rough from ranch work, his movements were surprisingly deft and precise as he prepared the venison. You cook often, Mr. Mackley? She asked, curious about this self-sufficient bachelor. Every day, he replied, adding herbs to the pot. My ma died when I was 14. Pa never remarried. By 15, I was doing most of the cooking, or we'd have starved on his attempts. Teresa smiled at that. My mother tried to teach me, but our cook was terribly territorial about her kitchen. I'm afraid my skills are rather basic. Seems you do just fine, Sam observed, nodding at her neatly chopped vegetables. Nothing basic about that. The simple compliment warmed Teresa more than the fire had. How strange that this rugged cattleman, so different from the refined Boston gentleman she'd known, could make her feel competent with just a few words. As the stew simmered, filling the cabin with savory aromas, Hank descended from the loft in dry clothes and settled at the table with a deck of cards. Either of you fancy a game of poker? Sam shook his head. No taking advantage of our guest, old man. Hank's weathered face split into a grin. Who says I'd win? Maybe the lady's a card shark. Teresa laughed, surprising herself with the genuine sound. I'm afraid I've never played poker, Mr. Winters. Perhaps you could teach me the rules. The evening passed pleasantly as they ate the hearty stew and cornbread, followed by Hank's patient explanation of poker basics. Using beans as chips, they played several hands, Teresa losing consistently but enjoying herself nonetheless. Outside, the storm continued unabated, but within the cabin's sturdy walls, a sense of camaraderie developed that made Teresa temporarily forget her near drowning and the impropriety of her situation. As the hour grew late, Sam rose and began preparing the bedroom. You'll take my room tonight, Miss Blackwell. Clean sheets and a solid door you can bolt if it makes you more comfortable. I couldn't possibly displace you, Teresa protested. I've slept on the floor by this hearth more times than I can count, Sam insisted. It's no hardship. Too exhausted to argue further, Teresa gratefully accepted the arrangement. Sam showed her to the small but neat bedroom, where a brass bed with a patchwork quilt occupied most of the space. There's water in the pitcher for washing up, he said, lingering awkwardly at the door. If you need anything in the night, just call out. You've been extraordinarily kind, Mr. Mackley, Teresa said softly. I don't know how to thank you properly for saving my life. Sam's expression softened. No thanks needed, anyone would have done the same. But they didn't, Teresa pointed out. You did, and I'm grateful. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with something Teresa couldn't quite name, an awareness, perhaps, of the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. Sleep well, Miss Blackwell, Sam finally said, touching the brim of his hat before backing away. Good night, Mr. Mackley. When the door closed behind him, Teresa sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's events. She'd nearly died in that river. If Sam Mackley hadn't happened along at precisely the right moment. She shuddered, unwilling to complete the thought. Instead, she washed her face in the cool water he'd provided, combed her fingers through her tangled hair as best she could, and crawled beneath the quilt. The pillow smelled faintly of pine and leather of Sam, and Teresa found the scent oddly comforting as she drifted into an exhausted sleep. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the cabin's small windows and the welcome absence of rain. Teresa woke disoriented, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar surroundings before the previous day's events came rushing back. She dressed quickly in Sam's borrowed clothes, knowing her own garments would still be unwearable. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Sam already awake, cooking breakfast at the stove. The enticing aroma of coffee and frying bacon filled the cabin. Morning, he greeted, glancing up from the pan. Hope you slept well. Better than I expected, Teresa admitted, self-consciously tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Without her hairpins and proper toilette, she knew she must look a fright. Any word on the roads? Hank rode out at first light to check, Sam replied, sliding a plate of eggs and bacon onto the table for her. Sit and eat. You must be famished. Teresa hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food was before her. She ate with more enthusiasm than decorum, earning an approving nod from Sam as he joined her with his own plate. You've got a healthy appetite. Good sign after yesterday's ordeal. My aunt would be mortified, Teresa confessed with a small smile. In Boston, ladies are expected to merely pick at their food in company, Sam snorted. Sounds like a waste of good cooking. Teresa laughed, then sobered as she considered the man across from her. In the clear light of morning, she could see the tiny lines around his eyes that spoke of long days squinting in the sun, and a thin scar that ran along his jawline. He was perhaps 30, with a face that had seen its share of hardship but hadn't been hardened by it. May I ask you something, Mr. Mackley? Sam looked up, a piece of bacon halfway to his mouth. Course. You mentioned you were born here, that your father claimed this land 30 years ago. That would have been 1846, Sam supplied. Pa came west with one of the early wagon trains before the gold rush brought the crowds. Met my mother here. She was traveling with her family to Oregon, but decided Colorado was far enough when she laid eyes on my father. A fond smile softened his features. At least, that's how Pa tells it. They must have been very brave, Teresa observed, to journey so far into unknown territory. Sam nodded, his expression turning reflective. They had to be. First winter nearly killed them. Indians raided twice that first year, but they stayed, built something from nothing. Pride colored his voice. Ranch is up to 800 head now, new breeding stock arriving next month. Before Teresa could respond, the cabin door swung open and Hank entered, his expression grim. Road to town still washed out in 3 places, he reported. Miller's Bridge is gone entirely. Might be 2-3 days before it's passable. Teresa's heart sank. 3 days alone with Sam Mackley would certainly set tongues wagging in Stone Creek. No matter the circumstances, Sam seemed to read her thoughts. We'll ride up to the Morgan place, he suggested. Sarah Morgan could chaperone Miss Blackwell until the roads cleared. Relief and an unexpected twinge of disappointment warred within Teresa. The Morgans, nearest neighbors, Sam explained, about an hour's ride north, good folks with 4 daughters, Mrs. Morgan would be happy for female company, I'm sure. Teresa nodded, grateful for his consideration of her reputation. That would be most appropriate, thank you. After breakfast, Sam found a pair of his mother's old boots that fit Teresa passably well and a shawl she could wear over his shirt. Her own dress, though rinsed and hung to dry overnight, was torn beyond immediate repair and still damp besides. "I'll have Hank deliver it to your aunt's shop when it's fully dry," Sam promised as he saddled his horse. Teresa thanked him, then allowed him to help her mount. Once again, she found herself seated before him, his arms encircling her as he held the reins. This time, however, with no imminent danger and in full daylight, Teresa was acutely aware of his proximity, the solid warmth of his chest against her back, the gentle way his hands avoided touching her inappropriately despite their necessary closeness. They rode in companionable silence for some time, the morning sun drying the muddy trail as they traveled. The landscape around them was breathtaking pine-covered mountains in the distance, rolling meadows dotted with spring wildflowers, and the occasional glimpse of deer or elk moving through the trees. "It's beautiful here," Teresa said softly. "So different from Boston." "Wilder, certainly, but there's something honest about it." Sam chuckled, the sound rumbling against her back. "Honest is one word for it, unforgiving might be another. Land doesn't care who you are or where you came from, treats everyone the same." "Is that why you love it?" Teresa asked, turning slightly to see his face. Sam's eyes met hers, thoughtful and direct. "Partly. Mostly I love it because it's home. Every ridge and valley, every creek and meadow, I know them like I know my own hands." Teresa nodded, understanding. "I never felt that way about Boston." Always too concerned with appearances, with who was rising or falling in society. "And now, what will you do in Stone Creek?" "Help my aunt with her shop for now," Teresa replied. "She's teaching me millinery. I've always had a knack for design." She hesitated, then added, "Beyond that, I'm not certain. Start fresh, I suppose, become someone new." Sam was quiet for a moment before saying, "Don't need to become someone new, Miss Blackwell. Just need to be who you truly are without all those Boston expectations weighing you down." The simple wisdom of his words struck Teresa deeply. She'd fled west thinking she needed to reinvent herself completely, but perhaps what she really needed was to discover who she'd been all along, beneath the social constraints of her upbringing. Their conversation was interrupted as they crested a small hill and a ranch house came into view in the valley below. Unlike Sam's bachelor cabin, this was a proper family home, 2 stories with a wide porch, several outbuildings, and a large corral where horses grazed. "The Morgan place," Sam announced. "Been here almost as long as my family's ranch." As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the sun. Behind her, several younger women appeared, the daughters Sam had mentioned, Teresa presumed, Mrs. Morgan proved to be a plump, cheerful woman with graying hair and kind eyes. She listened to Sam's explanation of Teresa's predicament with increasing concern, immediately taking Teresa's cold hands in her warm ones. "You poor dear. Of course you must stay with us until the road's clear." "Samuel Mackley, you did right bringing her here, though I'm not surprised. You've always been a gentleman, unlike some in these parts." The obvious approval in Mrs. Morgan's voice suggested Sam was held in high regard by his neighbors, a fact that pleased Teresa for reasons she chose not to examine too closely. The Morgan daughters Mary, Elizabeth, Catherine, and young Annabelle surrounded Teresa with enthusiastic welcome, clearly delighted by the unexpected visitor. "You must borrow some of my clothes," Mary, the eldest at 22, insisted. "We look to be of similar size." "And I can help fix your hair," offered Elizabeth, the second daughter. Mrs. Morgan shooed her excited daughters back a few paces. "Girls, give Miss Blackwell some air. She's had quite an ordeal." Sam dismounted and helped Teresa down, his hands lingering briefly at her waist before he stepped back. "You'll be in good hands here," he assured her. I'll check on the road daily and come for you as soon as it's passable. Teresa felt an unexpected reluctance to say goodbye. This man had saved her life, sheltered her, and shown her nothing but kindness and respect. Thank you again, Mr. Mackley, for everything. Sam touched the brim of his hat, a gesture Teresa was coming to find endearing. My pleasure, Miss Blackwell. As Sam remounted and prepared to depart, Mrs. Morgan invited him to stay for lunch, but he declined politely, citing chores at his ranch that couldn't wait. With a final nod to Teresa, he turned his horse and rode away, leaving her watching his retreating figure until he disappeared over the hill. Well now, Mrs. Morgan said, a knowing look in her eyes that made Teresa blush. Let's get you settled, shall we? The Morgan homestead was warm and welcoming, filled with the cheerful chaos of a large family. Teresa was given a small but comfortable room that she shared with 15-year-old Annabelle, who regarded her with undisguised curiosity and admiration. Is it true Sam Mackley pulled you from the river? The girl asked as she helped Teresa arrange the borrowed clothing Mary had provided. That's ever so romantic, like something from a novel. Teresa smiled at the girl's enthusiasm. It was rather more frightening than romantic, I'm afraid, but Mr. Mackley was indeed very brave. He's the most eligible bachelor in the county, Annabelle informed her with the gravity of one imparting great wisdom. Mary set her cap for him last year, but he was too polite to notice. Annabelle, Mary appeared in the doorway, her cheeks flaming, don't tell tales. It's not a tale if it's true, Annabelle retorted, unrepentant. Mary huffed and changed the subject. Mama says to come down for tea when you're ready, Miss Blackwell. When the sisters had gone, Teresa changed into the simple but well-made dress Mary had lent her, grateful to be in proper women's clothing again. She brushed her hair with a borrowed brush, noting with dismay the tangles and river debris still caught in the long strands. A thorough washing would be needed, but that would have to wait downstairs. Mrs. Morgan had prepared tea and fresh baked bread with preserves. As Teresa ate, the matron asked gentle questions about her background and plans in Stone Creek. Your Aunt Martha and I have nodded acquaintance, Mrs. Morgan mentioned. Fine seamstress and milliner, you're fortunate to have such a skill in the family. Teresa agreed, then found herself sharing more of her story than she'd intended: her parents' deaths, the scandal in Boston, her hope for a fresh start in the West. Mrs. Morgan listened without judgment, occasionally patting Teresa's hand sympathetically. Many come west to begin again, the older woman said when Teresa had finished. Nothing to be ashamed of in that, and you've made quite an entrance to our community, half drowned and rescued by Sam Mackley. She chuckled warmly. People will talk, of course, but they'll talk regardless. Best to give them something interesting. Teresa couldn't help but laugh at the woman's practical attitude. You remind me of my aunt. She never much cared for society's rules either. Rules have their place, Mrs. Morgan acknowledged, but out here, we judge a person's character by their actions, not their pedigree or past mistakes. You seem a decent young woman, Miss Blackwell, and that's what matters. The days at the Morgan Ranch passed pleasantly. Teresa helped with household chores, taught the younger girls some embroidery stitches she'd learned in Boston, and in turn learned from Mary how to make proper biscuits that didn't resemble doorstops, a skill her former cook had never deigned to share. On the afternoon of her second day with the Morgans, Teresa was hanging laundry with Catherine when the sound of hoofbeats drew their attention. Sam Mackley rode into the yard, his horse spattered with mud to the flanks. Mr. Mackley, Catherine called, waving enthusiastically. Sam dismounted, removing his hat as he approached. Afternoon, ladies. Hope I'm not interrupting. Teresa was surprised by how pleased she was to see him. Not at all. Any news of the road? Still impassable near Miller's Crossing, Sam reported, but making progress. Another day, maybe two. His eyes moved over her, seeming to confirm she was well. The Morgans treating you kindly? They've been wonderful, Teresa assured him, suddenly conscious of her wind-blown hair and the simple work dress she'd borrowed from Mary. And you, is all well at your ranch? Sam nodded, replacing his hat against the bright sun. Found two calves stranded on a sandbar in the river, managed to get them back to their mothers. Were you in danger? Teresa asked, concerned at the thought of him braving the same river that had nearly claimed her life. A slight smile touched his lips. Nothing I couldn't handle, been crossing that river since before I could walk. Mrs. Morgan appeared from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Samuel Mackley, just in time for dinner, you'll stay, of course. This time, Sam accepted the invitation, joining the Morgan family and Teresa at their large table. Teresa observed how comfortable he seemed with the family, teasing the younger girls, discussing cattle prices with Mr. Morgan, and complimenting Mrs. Morgan's cooking with genuine appreciation. After dinner, while the others retired to the parlor, Teresa found herself alone with Sam on the front porch. The spring evening was mild, with fireflies beginning to flicker in the gathering dusk. "Thank you for checking on me," Teresa said, leaning against the porch railing. Sam stood beside her, hat in hands, turning the brim absently. "Wanted to be sure you were settling in all right. You're very considerate." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and the chirping of crickets. Teresa found herself studying his profile in the fading light, struck by how at ease she felt in his presence despite their brief acquaintance. "Miss Blackwell," Sam began, then hesitated. "Teresa, if I may be so bold." "Yes," she encouraged. When he didn't continue, Sam cleared his throat. "Once the road's clear and you're back in Stone Creek, I'd like to call on you. Properly, I mean." He met her eyes directly. "If that would be agreeable." A warm flush spread through Teresa's chest. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Mackley, Sam," he corrected gently. "If we're to be friends, I'd prefer you use my given name." "Sam," Teresa repeated, liking the simple sound of it on her lips. "And you must call me Teresa, of course." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mary, who informed them that her father was setting up the checkerboard and requested Sam's participation. The moment between them broken, they rejoined the family indoors, but throughout the evening, Teresa was acutely aware of Sam's presence, of the occasional glances they exchanged across the parlor. When Sam departed later that evening, he took Teresa's hand briefly in his. "I'll return when the road is passable," he promised. "I'll look forward to it," she replied, meaning it sincerely, true to his word. Sam appeared 2 days later with news that the road to Stone Creek had finally been cleared enough for travel. Teresa found herself experiencing mixed emotions, eager to reunite with her aunt and begin her new life properly, yet reluctant to leave the easy camaraderie she'd found with the Morgans, and, if she was honest with herself, the daily visits from Sam that she'd come to anticipate. After heartfelt goodbyes and promises to visit soon, Teresa found herself once again seated before Sam on his horse, traveling the newly repaired road toward Stone Creek. This time, their conversation flowed easily, as if the days apart had somehow cemented the connection forged during her rescue. "Your aunt's shop is on Main Street?" Sam asked as they approached the small but growing town. "Yes, next to the general store," Teresa confirmed. "Blackwell Millinery and Dressmaking." Sam nodded. "I know it. Never had reason to enter, of course, but I've passed it many times." As they rode down Main Street, Teresa was aware of curious glances from townspeople. A young woman arriving on horseback with Sam Mackley, wearing borrowed clothes, was clearly a subject of interest. She straightened her spine, determined not to appear affected by the scrutiny. Aunt Martha was waiting anxiously at the shop door, alerted by someone who'd spotted them entering town. A tall, slender woman with silver-streaked dark hair and Teresa's same blue eyes, she rushed forward as Sam helped Teresa dismount. "Teresa, thank heavens." She embraced her niece fiercely before turning to Sam with extended hand. "Mr. Mackley, I understand I owe you my niece's life. There aren't words enough to express my gratitude." Sam shook her hand, looking somewhat embarrassed by the praise. "Just fortunate I was nearby, madam." "Your niece showed considerable courage herself." Aunt Martha ushered them both inside the shop, insisting Sam stay for tea despite his protests that he should be going. Teresa watched with amusement as her independent-minded aunt effectively steamrolled over Sam's objections, settling him in a chair in the small sitting room behind the shop. While her aunt prepared tea, Teresa quickly explained to Sam in hushed tones, "She's not one to take no for an answer." Best to accept the tea and make a graceful exit afterward. Sam's eyes crinkled with humor. I can see the family resemblance in spirit, if not features. Teresa laughed, then sobered. My aunt may seem unconventional, but she values propriety in her own way. If you meant what you said about calling on me. I did, Sam affirmed without hesitation, then you should formally ask her permission. Teresa fidgeted with the borrowed shawl. She's my guardian now, in a sense. Sam nodded, understanding. I'll speak with her before I leave. True to his word, when Teresa excused herself to change into her own clothes that her aunt had ready, Sam requested a private word with Martha Blackwell. Though Teresa couldn't hear their conversation when she returned in a simple blue dress of her own, her aunt's pleased expression told her all she needed to know. Mr. Mackley has asked to call on you Sunday after church, Aunt Martha informed her, eyes twinkling. I've given my consent, of course. Any man brave enough to plunge into flood waters to save a stranger has earned at least one social call. Sam rose, hat in hand. Until Sunday, then. He bowed slightly to both women before taking his leave. Once he'd gone, Aunt Martha turned to Teresa with raised eyebrows. Well, when Hank Winters told me a handsome rancher had pulled you from the river, I never imagined it would be Samuel Mackley. You've managed to attract the attention of the most eligible bachelor in the county within a week of your arrival. Teresa felt her cheeks warm. It wasn't intentional, I assure you. The best things rarely are, her aunt replied with a knowing smile. Now tell me everything and don't spare the details. In the days that followed, Teresa settled into life in Stone Creek. She helped in her aunt's shop, learning the millinery trade with surprising aptitude. The work was creative and satisfying, and the customers, once they realized she was Martha Blackwell's niece from Boston who'd survived a near drowning, were friendly and welcoming, if somewhat prone to curiosity about her adventure and her rescuer. By Sunday, Teresa had heard so many different versions of her own rescue that she scarcely recognized the tale. In some retellings, the river had been 20 feet deep. In others, Sam had dived from a cliff to save her. She laughed these exaggerations off good-naturedly, setting the record straight when asked directly. Church services that Sunday found Teresa seated beside her aunt, acutely aware of Sam's presence several pews behind them. She had chosen her best dress for the occasion, a modest lavender gown that her aunt had helped alter to the current fashion, and arranged her hair in a simple but elegant style. After the service, as the congregation mingled outside, Sam approached, looking uncharacteristically formal in a clean black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. He greeted both women politely, exchanged pleasantries with several neighbors, then offered his arm to Teresa. I thought we might walk to the cafe for lunch, he suggested. With your aunt's permission, of course. Aunt Martha waved them off with a smile. Enjoy yourselves, Teresa. I'll expect you home by 4. The town's small cafe was crowded with after-church diners, but Sam had apparently planned ahead, for the proprietor led them directly to a reserved table near the window. As they settled into their seats, Teresa was aware of curious glances and whispered conversations around them. I'm afraid we're providing the town with its Sunday entertainment, she observed quietly. Sam shrugged, unperturbed. Let them look. Nothing improper about two people sharing a meal. Their conversation over lunch ranged widely from Teresa's adjustment to life in Colorado to Sam's plans for expanding his ranch. Teresa found herself captivated by his obvious passion for the land and his work, so different from the men she'd known in Boston, who discussed business as a necessary evil rather than a calling. Next month I'm bringing in new breeding stock from Kansas, Sam explained, eyes alight with enthusiasm. Herefords hardier than most, good for this climate, should improve our calving rate significantly. You truly love ranching, don't you? Teresa observed. Sam considered this, then nodded. It's more than work, it's a way of living, being part of something larger than yourself. He looked slightly embarrassed. That probably sounds foolish to someone from the city. Not foolish at all, Teresa assured him. It sounds fulfilling in a way few occupations are. After lunch, They walked slowly through town, Sam pointing out buildings of interest and sharing bits of local history. Eventually, they found themselves at the small town park where they sat on a bench beneath a cottonwood tree. "May I ask you something personal?" Teresa ventured after a comfortable silence. Sam nodded. "Of course. You mentioned your mother died when you were 14 and your father raised you. Is he still?" "Pa passed 3 years ago," Sam replied, his expression softening with memory. "Pneumonia took him in the winter of '73. Hard loss, but he lived a good life. Ranch is mine now, though sometimes I still expect to see him sitting at the kitchen table when I come in for dinner." Teresa touched his arm gently. "I understand. I still find myself thinking of things to tell my mother, only to remember she's gone." Sam covered her hand with his own briefly. "Does get easier with time, not less sad exactly, but the memories bring more comfort than pain eventually." The simple wisdom of his words, spoken without pretense, moved Teresa deeply. This man understood grief, had walked through it and emerged strong but not hardened. She found herself wanting to know more about him, to understand what had shaped him into the person he was. As 4 o'clock approached, they made their way back to the millinery shop, walking slowly, as if neither was eager for the afternoon to end. "May I call on you again?" Sam asked as they reached the shop door. Teresa smiled, feeling a pleasant warmth spread through her chest. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't." And so began a courtship that soon became the talk of Stone Creek. Sam called regularly, taking Teresa for rides in the countryside, escorting her to church socials, and occasionally bringing small, thoughtful gifts: wildflowers, a book of poetry he'd ordered from Denver, or fresh honey from a neighbor's hives. Aunt Martha observed their growing attachment with approving eyes, giving them sufficient privacy for conversation while maintaining appropriate supervision. On evenings, when Sam stayed for dinner, the three would often sit on the small porch afterward, discussing everything from politics to literature to local gossip. As spring turned to summer, Teresa found herself falling deeply in love with both Sam and the rugged country he'd shown her. She'd taken to riding out with him to his ranch occasionally, helping with garden chores or simply walking the property as he proudly pointed out improvements and future plans. Hank Winters had become a friend as well, his gruff exterior hiding a kind heart and sly humor that often had Teresa laughing until her sides ached. One particularly beautiful July evening, Sam invited Teresa to ride to a special place on his property. With Aunt Martha's permission, and Hank's promise to chaperone at a discreet distance, they set out just before sunset, climbing a winding trail through pine forests until they reached a high meadow overlooking the valley. The view was breathtaking: mountains painted gold by the setting sun, the river a silver ribbon winding through the landscape, and Sam's ranch buildings tiny in the distance. "It's magnificent," Teresa breathed, dismounting with Sam's assistance. Sam spread a blanket on the grass and helped her sit, then settled beside her, careful to maintain a respectable distance. Hank, true to his word, remained just within sight, pretending great interest in a stand of aspens some 50 yards away. "Used to come up here with my pa when I was a boy," Sam explained, his voice soft with memory. "He'd point out landmarks, tell me stories about the early days, said someday all this would be mine to protect and nurture." He turned to face Teresa fully. "I never understood until recently what he meant by that the land is a gift and a responsibility, not just a possession." Teresa nodded, touched by the reverence in his voice. "And now you do understand." "Now I do," Sam confirmed. He took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "Teresa, I brought you here because this place matters to me, and you matter to me more than I can properly express." Teresa's heart quickened as Sam reached for her hand. "I know we haven't known each other long by some standards," he continued, "but I've learned enough about you to know what kind of woman you are: brave, kind, intelligent." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I never expected to find someone like you, especially not being dragged downstream by the Blackstone River." A small laugh escaped Teresa at the memory, now transformed by time into something almost precious rather than terrifying. "What I'm trying to say, rather poorly," Sam pressed on, is that I've fallen in love with you, Teresa Blackwell, and if you could see your way to considering a future with me, I'd be the most fortunate man in Colorado territory. Tears sprang to Teresa's eyes, not of sadness but overwhelming joy. Oh, Sam, I've fallen in love with you too, so completely that it sometimes frightens me. Relief and happiness transformed Sam's features. Then would you do me the very great honor of becoming my wife? I can't offer Boston luxury, but I promise you a good life, a home filled with respect and love, and my complete devotion for as long as I live. Yes, Teresa whispered, then more firmly, yes, I will marry you, Samuel Mackley. Sam's smile was radiant as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold ring with a small but perfect diamond. It was my mother's, he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. Pa gave it to me before he died, said to save it for when I found the right woman. The ring fit as if made for her. Teresa admired it in the fading light, then looked up to find Sam watching her with such tenderness that her heart seemed to expand in her chest. May I kiss you? He asked softly. I know it's not entirely proper without Teresa closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in answer. The kiss was gentle and sweet, a promise of the love they would share. When they parted, both were smiling, a little breathless. From his position by the aspens, Hank cleared his throat loudly, reminding them of his presence. Sam chuckled, keeping hold of Teresa's hand. I believe our chaperone is suggesting we head back before dark, he said, helping Teresa to her feet. The ride back to town was filled with plans and dreams when they would marry, where they would live, how they would combine their lives. Sam suggested a September wedding, giving them time to prepare but not so long a wait that it would seem interminable. Teresa agreed, thinking how beautiful the aspen trees would be in their golden autumn dress. Aunt Martha received the news of their engagement with delighted approval, immediately embracing Sam and welcoming him to the family. I had a feeling about you too from the moment you brought her back from that river, she declared, wiping happy tears from her eyes. Some things are simply meant to be. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Teresa and her aunt worked together to create a simple but elegant wedding gown. Sam, with Hank's help, added a bedroom to his cabin and began construction on a proper house that would be ready by spring. The townspeople, who had watched their courtship with interest, contributed in their own ways offers of food for the reception, flowers from gardens, and numerous well wishes. 2 days before the wedding, disaster nearly struck again. Teresa had ridden out to the ranch to help with final preparations for the small reception they planned to hold there. While Sam met with the minister to discuss the ceremony, she decided to gather wildflowers along the riverbank for decorations. The Blackstone River, so much calmer now in September than it had been during that fateful May flood, seemed harmless enough. Teresa kept well back from the edge, remembering all too vividly her previous encounter with its currents. As she bent to pick a particularly lovely cluster of late-blooming columbine, the ground beneath her, weakened by the earlier floods and recent rains, suddenly gave way. With a startled cry, Teresa found herself sliding down the muddy bank toward the water. She clawed desperately at the ground, managing to catch hold of an exposed tree root that temporarily halted her descent. Below her, the river wasn't in flood, but its current was still swift enough to be dangerous. "Help," she called, hoping someone at the ranch would hear her. "Sam, Hank." For several terrifying minutes, she clung to the root, feeling it slowly giving way under her weight. Just as it began to tear loose from the soil, a familiar voice called from above. "Teresa, hold tight, I've got you." Looking up, Teresa saw Sam scrambling down the bank toward her, a rope secured around his waist and anchored to a tree above. His face was grim with determination as he reached her, strong arms wrapping securely around her waist just as the root finally tore free. "I've got you," he repeated, holding her firmly against him as they dangled precariously above the water. "Hank," he shouted upward. "Pull us up." Gradually, they were drawn up the bank, Sam shielding Teresa with his body as they scraped against the rough earth. When they finally reached level ground, both were muddy and breathless but unharmed. "Are you hurt?" Sam demanded, checking her for injuries with gentle hands. "Just my pride," Teresa assured him, attempting a weak smile. "It seems the Blackstone River is determined to claim me." Sam's expression was a mixture of relief and lingering fear. "Not while I'm alive to prevent it." He helped her to her feet, keeping a supportive arm around her waist. "I think you've picked your last riverside flowers, my love." Teresa leaned against him gratefully. "No argument from me. Though I must say, you're becoming quite proficient at these rescues." Sam's laugh was slightly shaky. "Let's not make it a habit. My heart can only take so much." Back at the cabin, Hank fussed over them both, insisting Teresa drink some whiskey-laced tea for the shock while Sam changed out of his muddy clothes. When Sam returned, he knelt before Teresa's chair, taking her still trembling hands in his. "Perhaps we should consider a wedding location far from any water," he suggested, only half joking. Teresa touched his cheek tenderly. "I'm beginning to think the river is somehow responsible for bringing us together. First it nearly took me, giving you the chance to save me. Now it's reminded us both how precious our time together is." Sam turned his face to kiss her palm. "I didn't need reminding of that, Teresa. I've known it from the moment I first saw you in those waters, fighting so bravely to survive." The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, the aspens indeed resplendent in their autumn gold. The ceremony was held in the small Stone Creek church, filled to capacity with townspeople, neighboring ranchers, and the few relatives Teresa's aunt had managed to contact in time to attend. Teresa, radiant in her ivory gown with columbines in her hair, walked down the aisle on the arm of Mr. Morgan, who had graciously offered to give her away in the absence of her father. Sam waited at the altar, handsome in a new black suit, his eyes never leaving her face as she approached. The vows were simple and heartfelt. When Sam placed the gold band beside her engagement ring and promised to love, honor, and cherish her all the days of his life, Teresa felt a sense of rightness and belonging she'd never experienced before. This man, this place was her home now, as surely as if she'd been born to it. The reception at the ranch lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and more food than the entire county could consume. As sunset approached, Sam drew Teresa away from the celebrations to a quiet corner of the porch. "Happy, Mrs. Mackley?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. Teresa leaned back against his chest, watching the last rays of sunlight gild the distant mountains. "Completely, and you, Mr. Mackley?" "More than I ever thought possible." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I've been thinking about what you said about the river bringing us together." "Oh," Teresa turned in his arms to face him. Sam nodded, his expression thoughtful. "My father used to say that life is like a river, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, but always moving forward, carrying us to places we never expected to go." His eyes met hers, full of love. "I think he would have said you were exactly where the current was meant to take me." Teresa rose on tiptoe to kiss him, unconcerned about the guests who might be watching. "Then I'm grateful for that current, even if it did try to drown me first," Sam laughed, drawing her closer. "As am I, my love, as am I." As twilight deepened into night and stars appeared above the Colorado mountains, Teresa and Sam rejoined their guests, beginning their life together surrounded by community, love, and the promise of many more rescues, both literal and figurative, in the years to come. In the decades that followed, the story of their meeting became legend in Stone Creek and beyond. Their children and grandchildren never tired of hearing how the Blackstone River had nearly claimed their mother and grandmother, only to be thwarted by their father and grandfather's courage. And on each anniversary of that fateful day, Sam and Teresa would ride together to the riverbank, not to tempt fate, but to remind themselves of the power of both nature and love to change the course of lives in an instant. There, with the sound of rushing water in their ears, they would renew their private vows to hold tight to one another, no matter what currents life might bring.